Welcome into the Bonesville Pregame Podcast. Al Myatt, joined by Kevin Monroe. And Kevin, of course, great defensive back in his playing days at East Carolina. The 1999 team recognized earlier this season in Greenville. Kevin, of course, part of the Pirate Radio Network now. And Kevin was on hand last Thursday night, East Carolina hosting Florida Atlantic and taking a 49-14 win over the visitors. Caden Hauser, for the second straight game, Kevin, had 5 touchdown passes.
Yeah, found himself being the American Conference Offensive Player of the Week. Didn't have the turnovers that he had the previous week with the 5 touchdown passes. But, I mean, they started off in a hurry. I mean, they ran the trick play, play number 1, and got some good yards with, I believe it was Savage ended up making that catch after the double reverse. And then on play 2, they go up top to Chase Sowell, and he makes a big catch. And so the game started with fireworks. The Boneyard was full of students. That was exciting. Maybe not as many Pirate fans as I would like to see, but still a good raucous crowd. And they gave him a lot to cheer about. And after that, they just continued to stack points. As you mentioned, 21 in the first quarter. Just the way the Pirates are scoring points now, it's what we always heard about what this offense could do. And granted, the last 2 opponents haven't been the 2 toughest on our schedule. And, Tulsa will be in that line of maybe not the toughest on our schedule, but it's still good to see Hauser making accurate passes, hitting the open receivers, not missing open guys. And you can turn on your television on any Saturday or Sunday and see a starting quarterback missing open receivers or not even seeing them or overthrowing them. And so the fact that he's been so accurate with his passes and finding the guys that need to get the football has been pleasantly surprising to see. And he hasn't been trying to force ball in the tight spaces, which is what got Jake Garcia in trouble. So thrilled with the way Caden Hauser's playing right now.
Yes, and of course, bowl eligibility, a possibility with a win at Tulsa this Thursday night, 7:30 kickoff. It will be shown on ESPN. Kevin, Blake Harrell, the interim coach of the Pirates, talked about that transition, taking that momentum from 2 decisive wins at home on the road against the Golden Hurricane. They've had a little bit of extra time to prepare. They have not played since a decisive loss at Alabama Birmingham on November 2nd. So a lot of factors play in to this situation. Blake Harrell says it doesn't matter that the Pirates have had less time to prepare. Nobody's going to pay attention to that. What's important is the outcome.
Yeah, this late in the season, you know what the scheme is, you know what you're doing at your position. And so that's the reason that Coach Harrell was able to come in, shorten practices, get guys off their feet, get them more fresh for the game time, because by now you know what to do. They're not installing new plays. They're not, doing a bunch of things that you need to be out on the field to kind of do walkthroughs to learn and understand. It's the standard repeating everything. You always hear coaches say, if we play our game, we'll be okay. And they know their game at this point. Now, of course, you have to cater what you're doing to the opponent, and they will have done that this week with Tulsa and trying to find a way to stop what Tulsa does, but also run East Carolina's offense against what Tulsa does defensively. And so they will have done that. But in terms of, worrying so much about the other opponent or worrying about, install or input this late in the season, that's gone. They just have to get ready to play each week. And the thing that I love about what they're doing these days is they just seem more loose. Again, I understand that the opponents haven't been as tough, and it's easier to be loose when you're leading in ball games. But they seem to be having more fun. Coach Harrell is an excited guy. He has his heart on his sleeve when he's coaching, and I feel like the players have adapted that. Coach Houston was a very intense guy, a very serious guy. I don't think he cracked a lot of jokes at practice. I don't think he did a lot of the things that they're doing now that, has quote unquote brought fun to practices. But that stuff matters. You hear the term thrown around all the time about being a player's coach, and I think that Coach Harrell is certainly much more of a player's coach than the previous coach. And so I think that's helped to translate into how guys play on the field.
One thing about the success of the passing game against Florida Atlantic is Hauser found a lot of different receivers.
And he's done that now 2 weeks in a row. He threw 5 different touchdown passes in the previous game and to different receivers. And this game was more of the same. He did throw 2 to Anthony Wright or Winston Wright in this past game, but everyone else just got 1, and he kind of spread it out. And I love to see what Anthony Smith is doing in the open field, what Jari Patterson's doing in the open field. These guys are just so elusive, have so much speed. Chase Sowell hasn't had a big drop in 2 or 3 games. He was having some problems with the drops prior to now, and it seems like he's locked in and playing well. And so, yeah, Caton is spreading that football around, so nobody gets. I mean, I think Chase only had that 1 catch. It was the second play of the game, might have been his only catch of the day, and I'm sure he doesn't love that, but he loves them putting up the amount of scores they're putting up and seeing everybody else do well. And so, yeah, you can't complain with the way he's doing that. We've actually played a couple games in a row where there was an obvious number 1 receiver on the teams that we played against where they had 20, 30 more catches than the next guy. That didn't happen in East Carolina. I mean, that ball is spread around and everybody has an opportunity to get catches and get scores.
Well, going to Tulsa, when you say East Carolina at Tulsa, it brings to mind a game several years ago. East Carolina should have won. And the conference, issued a statement that the officials had made some incorrect rulings, and it decided the game. You hope you don't see that sort of thing this Thursday night.
Yeah, and I don't know if that is specifically being at Tulsa or is that specific group of refs. It was just a bad night for them. It's a rough night. Plays that were clearly miscalled were just kind of happened, and you wonder. Even you went to review, and you could clearly tell. I think the knee was down on one play before a fumble, and they still called it a fumble. Just a couple of different things happened that were just really weird and didn't seem to make sense. Just one of those things that happens. You pray that it doesn't happen again. I've also been to Tulsa for a conference championship game under Skip Holtz where everything went right. And, they picked off 5 or 6 passes off a good Tulsa offense and found a way to win that game. And so I don't think necessarily playing at Tulsa is a jinx per se. But certainly a ton of bad things happened in that last game and left a bad taste in a lot of Pirate fans' mouths.
Well, Tulsa has struggled, but, to hear Blake Harrell talk, they're capable of establishing a running game. That's what they look to do first in their offense. And then they're playing apparently 2 quarterbacks. Yeah,
so 340 rushing attempts on the year versus 318 passes. So not quite 50-50, maybe 55-45, somewhere in that neighborhood of run versus pass. They have several different guys that they run that average, 30 plus yards rushing per game. Nobody is really established himself as a runaway leader at that running back position, but Bill Jackson and Anthony Watkins are both getting a ton of carries, both have close to 300 yards net and are averaging about 35 yards a game rushing, over 4 yards a carry. So there's some guys that you really have to look out for. The 2 quarterbacks in Francis Kirk and Cooper Legas. Cooper is a little bit more of a runner. He's up there amongst the list of guys that can really run the football, whereas Francis Kirk is not. He's on the bottom of the list of rushers and has a -10 net rushing yards. Obviously, sacks play a role in that, but he does not seem to be a very mobile quarterback. And I think every coach would love to prepare for the guy who doesn't move very well because it makes him more of a statue back there, and the sack numbers can go up in games like that. But yeah, you're correct in that they want to establish a run, and for the second straight week, after facing FAU, who wanted to run the football, I think the Pirates showed up and showed that they are good against the run or can be good against the run. You look back at the Charlotte and the Army games and you think, wow, who was that defense? Didn't have those issues last week. And even in the secondary, the week before against Temple, even though you win that game pretty big, you give up several deep passes, deep touchdown passes. That didn't happen this week versus FAU. Now, obviously the starting quarterback got hurt and the backup had to come in, and so that's going to lead towards passing issues. But the defense looks a lot better the last 2 weeks than they've looked in a long, long time.
That's true. Well, East Carolina did not play this past Saturday. I know a lot of folks were watching college football. There was a lot of big matchups. And I know you and your son Marcus probably watched some games, but he's a junior all-conference receiver at North Raleigh Christian. And I think you and him are probably looking at programs and kind of projecting how he might fit into different schemes and stuff as you watch the games.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And actually, his schedule is pretty full with game day visits to universities. And so we were in the mountains in Harrisonburg at James Madison this past Saturday. So we got the chance to see them play Georgia State. He enjoyed that environment. It was good. Next week we go to Towson. The week after we go to Duke, and then following that we go to Penn State. And so he's thrilled with the way recruiting has been going. Coaches are reaching out, every day, and yeah, he's looking at his team to see, where he might fit best. Who's got a good returning quarterback? Who's got tight ends or receivers that are leaving, where he might fit in and get a chance to play fairly early. And it's been fun to watch. It's been fun to just kind of sit back. I went through this 30 plus years ago. And so for him to go through it now, it's cool for me just to pay attention and see what's going to come out of this. And, his hard work this season paid off. He transferred schools to go to North Raleigh Christian and became all conference and had a really good season, led all the conference in receiving yards. And so it's been a fun time. And now he's reaping those rewards by this recruiting process.
Well, Kevin, this trip to Tulsa, it is 7 days from the last game. Coach Harrell, in his news conference on Monday, said it's a little different from going Saturday to Saturday to go Thursday to Thursday. And you're still, your heavy days are different. But talk a little bit about preparing for a Thursday night game.
Yeah, it is interesting, and lucky for them, it's Thursday to Thursday. As you mentioned, a lot of times you go Saturday to Thursday, it's a quick turnaround. But at least this time they had that time to prepare, and so for them, they just had to adjust their practice schedule a little bit. I'm sure the normal Sunday light day, that was probably more like the Friday light day, and Sunday was a full go kind of day. Players usually always have Monday off. I don't know if they had Monday off this week, but that may have had to change. And so it's different how you adjust the schedule, but the fact that you still have 6 days in between games to prepare for that seventh day game day is helpful. You certainly often have these times where you have a game on a Tuesday, then you have it on a Saturday, then you have it on a Thursday, and it can just really jack your schedule up. But to have it consistently on back-to-back Thursdays is the best way you can do it if you're going to have a Thursday night game. So I think the preparation has been fine. Nothing really will change other than what they do on what day. But they still had their full complement of practice days and were able to really scheme both offensively and defensively against Tulsa.
Kevin, from what you know about Tulsa, what kind of game atmosphere do you think they will have?
The few times I've been there, I can't say that it's been a large ruckus crowd. I don't know how many of their stadium seats, but it's nowhere near what East Carolina seats. And even when I was there, as I talked about the conference championship game, even then it was a pretty nice crowd, but it wasn't the same atmosphere as it would be for a conference championship game in Dowdy-Ficklen Stadium. It wasn't as loud. The stadium's not as large. Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's you can say they love their college football, but a lot of the people that live there are big OU fans, right? They're fans of Oklahoma University and not Tulsa. And that's not to take away anything from their fans. I'm sure they have a strong fan base. It's just not the same when you have a much larger university just not too far away. And so I think the atmosphere will be fine. But for a Thursday night game, and a losing team playing an opponent like East Carolina that hasn't had a tremendous season, I can't imagine it'll be a huge draw. So I would expect it to be a smaller crowd than they probably like.
I was trying to recall last year, Kevin, the game that East Carolina pretty much had put away, but fumbled deep in the opponent's territory and allowed the visitors to come back and win. Was that not Tulsa that they were playing last year?
I think you might be right, and I think that might have been one of the questionable calls, was the Pirate player had his knee down and they called it a fumble, and they Tulsa recovered it and ended up getting the win subsequently, and that's probably the one you're thinking of. We had a couple questionable situations last year where that led to losses, but that was definitely one of them that hurt.
I seem to recall that they had Rajay Harris in a Wildcat and snapped him, and it was mishandled. People questioned, the play call at that point. It was certainly a big turnover in that game. How does that, a game you should have won, how does that affect this year's team in terms of their motivation? Are they thinking, well, we should have won that game last year against this team? Does that add to any kind of payback motivation?
So I would say just the fact that it was a close, competitive game makes it where they feel comfortable and confident. It doesn't really matter how the game ended. More so, did they get blown out, or was it competitive? Were they in it? And everyone knows that this year's East Carolina team is so much better than last year's, especially offensively. And so you go into this thinking, well, we played them close a year ago and we weren't very good. I know that we can take it to them this year. I think that's the perspective, the mind frame that East Carolina players are in. Sometimes that can make you overconfident and maybe a little bit cocky. So hopefully that's not the case. But at least they know, based on last year's game, that this is a team that they can play well against and win.
All right, it's going to be Thursday night at Tulsa. Let's talk about that Bonesville tradition. Kevin's keys to the game.
I think it's a little bit similar to last week when we talked about controlling the line of scrimmage, and we know that we need to run the football to be successful, to open things up for Caden Hauser in the passing game and the RPO game. And so I love what I've seen in the last few weeks out of Rajay Harris and London Montgomery and Marlon Gunn. So we need to get the running game going early. Tulsa's giving up over 4 yards a carry to opposing teams' runners. And so they need to establish that run early, as they've done the last 2 weeks, and open up that passing game. And then conversely, on the opposite side, stopping the run. Tulsa really wants to run the football. They do a pretty good job of it. They're also running for over 4 yards a carry. We talked about the different running backs they have. They have 3 or 4 they'll give the football to. And so they need to slow that running game down and make Francis, the quarterback, beat them through the air. He's got 5 interceptions on the year, only 7 touchdown passes. So be better stopping the run to force him to put the football in the air. Now in the secondary, 2 games ago versus Temple, you let several deep balls go over your head, and you find yourself in a situation where you're giving up explosion plays. You can't do that on the road in the conference, because Tulsa, they have come up with a couple wins this year. They had a nice win over UTSA that was nice, and then another one at Louisiana Tech. They're both close ball games, and so they can score points and they can beat you. So you've got to eliminate those explosion plays. So these defensive backs have to play better. We didn't see as much from Nash this past week at corner. Wilson Lamp stepped in and played well, and some younger guys stepped in and played well. So I expect them to play better in the secondary. They'll have to play better in the secondary, like they did against FAU to win this ball game. And then obviously in the special teams game, we've had no hiccups lately, no muffed punts or issues on fumbles when kickoff return. So continue to be solid in the kickoff return game. And I think those things will lead you to a win this week.
All right. And Kevin, as always, enjoyed the visit on the Bonesville Pregame Podcast. And I look forward to talking with you next week.
Appreciate it, Al.